Chapter 19. The Mansion and the Theatre. Dr. Primrose meets a man who pretends to be the master of a mansion. The man is actually the butler. The true master is Mr. Arnold. Dr. Primrose meets Arabella. Later, he attends a play. He discovers that the actor playing Horatio is his son George. Memory word. Reunion. Chapter 20. George rejoins the group. George is reunited with his father and Arabella at the Arnold household. This gives the family a temporary moment of emotional relief. Memory word. Return. Chapter 21. Thornhill and separation again. Thornhill arrives. He becomes interested in Arabella. He obtains a military commission for George. George is sent toward the West Indies. Dr. Primrose then begins traveling home. And this ultimately leads toward the discovery of Olivia's whereabouts. Memory word. Separation. The complete memory formula. For chapters 17 to 21. Remember, 17. FLIGHT. Olivia leaves. 18. FEVER. Dr. Primrose searches and becomes ill. 19. DISCOVERY. He discovers George acting on stage and meets Arabella again. 20. REUNION. George rejoins his father. 21. SEPARATION. Thornhill interferes, George is sent away, and Dr. Primrose continues his journey. So the sequence is: flight fever, discovery, reunion, separation. An important correction to the slide. There is one point on this visual that should be understood carefully for examination purposes. The slide's first box says, Olivia flees just before marrying Farmer Williams. That is broadly useful as a simplified visual summary, but the exact sequence is more nuanced. The family has been considering Farmer Williams as a possible husband for Olivia, and a deadline is established for Thornhill to declare his intentions. When that does not lead to a proper marriage proposal, the family prepares for Olivia's marriage to Williams. Before that marriage can take place, Olivia leaves with a gentleman. So, for an examination, remember, Olivia does not complete a marriage with Farmer Williams. She disappears before that planned marriage takes place. Another important exam point. The slide labels this whole section, the abduction and the search. But remember that the full truth about Olivia's situation is revealed later. At this point in chapters 17 to 21, Dr. Primrose does not know the complete story. He knows only that Olivia has disappeared with a man. Later, Olivia explains that Thornhill was responsible for taking her away and that his apparently respectable intentions were deceptive. So when studying chapter 17, distinguish between what Dr. Primrose knows at the time and what the reader eventually learns. This distinction is very important for understanding dramatic irony. Why this phase is a turning point. Now, students, let us understand why this phase is so important. Before chapter 17, many problems are treated humorously. Moses is fooled. The family tries to become fashionable. They make foolish social decisions. But after Olivia disappears, the emotional stakes become much higher. The family is no longer laughing at a foolish horse transaction. Now a daughter is missing. A father is desperately searching. A son is unexpectedly discovered on a stage. Another son is separated again. A romantic relationship is threatened. The family's emotional security is collapsing. So the novel's tone becomes increasingly serious. This is why chapter 17 is often identified as a major climax or turning point. The fortune tracker. What does the dip really mean? Now look at the graph again. The line is already very low. Then we see sharp dip. Calamity and separation. That is the perfect summary. The family has already lost money. Now it begins losing something even more valuable. Family stability. Money can sometimes be recovered, but emotional wounds are much harder to repair. So the sharp dip represents Olivia's disappearance, Dr. Primrose's illness, George's difficult situation, family separation, increasing uncertainty. This is the point where the family's suffering becomes much deeper. The fortune tracker. What does the dip really mean? Now look at the graph again. The line is already very low. Then we see sharp dip, calamity and separation. That is the perfect summary. The family has already lost money. Now it begins losing something even more valuable: family stability. Money can sometimes be recovered, but emotional wounds are much harder to repair. So the sharp dip represents Olivia's disappearance, Dr. Primrose's illness, George's difficult situation, family separation, increasing uncertainty. This is the point where the family's suffering becomes much deeper. The central lesson of this slide. The most important lesson from these chapters is: appearances can be dangerously misleading, but genuine love can survive suffering. The family repeatedly misunderstands appearances. They cannot immediately understand Thornhill. They have already misunderstood Burchell. The supposed gentleman at the mansion is actually a butler. The unknown actor is actually George. Olivia believes she is entering a romantic future but is actually entering danger. So the novel keeps asking, what is real? And who can we trust? At the same time, Dr. Primrose's love for his children remains genuine. That becomes one of the strongest moral forces in the novel. Final story retelling. Let us now close our eyes for a moment and imagine the whole phase as a movie. We begin at the Primrose home. The family believes that Olivia may finally have a secure future with Farmer Williams if Thornhill refuses to make a proper commitment. Thornhill becomes jealous. The family thinks that everything may settle peacefully. They enjoy a happy family moment. Bill sings his comic song. Everyone feels safe. Then suddenly Dick arrives. Olivia is gone. The entire atmosphere changes. Dr. Primrose is shocked. He wants to pursue the man who took her. Eventually he sets out to search for his daughter. He travels far. His body fails. He develops a fever. He remains at an inn for 3 weeks. After recovering, he continues his journey. Along the way, he encounters actors and later meets a man who appears to be a gentleman. He is invited to a magnificent mansion, but the apparent gentleman is only the butler. The real master is Mr. Arnold. And then Dr. Primrose sees someone from his past, Arabella Wilmot, the woman who was supposed to marry his son George. Later, they attend a play. Dr. Primrose watches the actor on stage. Suddenly he realizes, that is my son. George is there, his lost son. His family history comes rushing back. George is reunited with his father. But happiness does not last long. Thornhill arrives. He becomes interested in Arabella. He arranges a military commission for George. George is sent away, and Dr. Primrose continues his journey home. So the phase gives us both reunion and separation. That is the emotional rhythm of chapters 17 to 21. Final exam memory map. Remember these 5 words. Olivia in mansion George Thornhill. Olivia leaves with a gentleman. The family begins the search. In Dr. Primrose becomes ill and spends about 3 weeks recovering. Mansion. He encounters the disguised social world of the Arnold household and meets Arabella. George. He unexpectedly discovers his son performing on stage. Thornhill returns, pursues Arabella, obtains George's military commission, and contributes to another separation. And the emotional formula is hope, shock, search, discovery, reunion, separation. That is the heart of Phase 4. The family began this journey hoping to find happiness through social respectability and advantageous relationships. Instead, they discover that appearances are unreliable. The charming man may be dangerous. The poor man may be loyal. The stranger may be family. The apparent gentleman may be a servant. And the daughter who thinks she is going toward love is actually moving toward suffering. At the center of everything is Dr. Primrose. He is no longer simply the confident moral teacher we met at the beginning. He is now a father who is learning through suffering. He searches for his missing daughter. He becomes ill. He unexpectedly finds his lost son. He watches that son leave again. And he continues moving forward despite everything. That is why this phase is so important. It transforms the Vicar of Wakefield from a largely comic story of family foolishness into a much more serious story about suffering, separation, deception, parental love, and the painful difference between appearance and reality. Now we come to Phase 5 of the Vicar of Wakefield. The title of this phase is The Prodigal Son and the False Priest, chapters 21 to 24. This is one of the most emotionally powerful sections of the novel. At this point, The Primrose family has already suffered financial loss, social humiliation, misunderstanding, separation, and Olivia's disappearance. But now something very important happens. The family begins to recover some lost relationships. Dr. Primrose finds his son George. He also finds Olivia, but every moment of happiness is followed by another disaster. So this phase has a repeated pattern: reunion, hope, deception, revelation, disaster, courage. And that is exactly what we are going to follow. Part 1. The Prodigal Son. Let us begin with the heading, The Prodigal Son. The phrase, prodigal son, immediately suggests the biblical story of a son who leaves home, experiences hardship, and eventually returns. George Primrose is not exactly the same as the biblical prodigal son, but the comparison is useful. George has been away from his family for a long time. He has experienced failure. He has tried several occupations. He has made mistakes. He has suffered disappointment. And now he has returned to his father. So this part of the novel is about a lost son returning to his family. But Goldsmith gives the idea a more complicated form. George has not simply wasted money and returned home. He has been trying to survive in a difficult world. Let us understand his journey carefully. George's failures. Look at the first box on the slide. It says, George's failures. The slide gives us 3 important occupations: Grub Street writer, art seller, tutor. These are stages in George's unsuccessful attempt to establish himself. Remember that George was originally expected to marry Arabella Wilmot. He was educated. He was supposed to become successful. But circumstances changed. The family's financial collapse destroyed his expected future. George therefore has to go out into the world and make his own living. And this is where his difficulties begin. George goes to London. George first goes to London. He expects to find an opportunity there. But London is not the easy world he imagined. There are many educated young men competing for work. Having an education does not automatically guarantee success. This is an important point for students. Sometimes we think, if I am educated, I will automatically succeed. But Goldsmith shows us that education alone does not guarantee employment, money, or happiness. George has ability, but he lacks financial security and useful connections. George is a writer. George begins trying to make money through writing. He becomes what the novel describes as a Grub Street writer. Grub Street is associated with poorly paid literary hack work. In simple words, George is trying to survive by writing whatever work he can obtain. He is not writing great literature because he has complete artistic freedom. He is writing because he needs money. This is an important distinction. There is a difference between writing because you love literature and writing because you need to survive. George discovers how difficult it is to make a living from literature. George becomes an art seller. His writing career does not provide enough success. So he tries another occupation. He becomes involved in selling pictures or paintings. Again, he enters a world he does not fully understand. He has to persuade people to buy artwork. But he is not naturally suited to commercial deception. He is too honest and inexperienced for some of the tricks of the trade. So again, he struggles. This is why the slide calls this section George's failures. But remember something important. Failure does not mean George is worthless. It means he is inexperienced and struggling to find his place in society. George is a tutor. George then works as a tutor. This seems more suitable for his education. He has knowledge. He can teach. He hopes that this occupation will give him stability. But once again, circumstances work against him. The young person he tutors eventually leaves, and George is again left without secure employment. So look at George's pattern. Writer, art seller, tutor. Every attempt fails to provide him with a permanent future. Why is George's story important? Students, George's story is not included simply to make the novel longer. Goldsmith is showing us the difficulty faced by an educated but financially insecure young man. George has education, intelligence, good intentions, and ambition. But he does not have wealth, social power, or reliable connections. This makes him vulnerable, so George becomes a contrast to Squire Thornhill. Both are young men, but their circumstances are completely different. George must struggle to survive. Thornhill has wealth and social power. This contrast is important to Goldsmith's criticism of 18th century society. The Dark Alliance. Now look at the second box. It says, the Dark Alliance. The word, dark, is important. It suggests that this friendship contains something hidden. George becomes associated with Thornhill. He works for him. He sees Thornhill's lifestyle closely. And gradually George begins to understand that Thornhill is not the honorable gentleman he appears to be. Thornhill enjoys flattery, pleasure, social attention, and the admiration of women. George becomes increasingly uncomfortable with his master's behavior. The important contrast. George has moral principles. Thornhill has wealth and power. George wants to live honorably. Thornhill wants to enjoy life without accepting moral responsibility. Therefore, although they become friends or associates, they are fundamentally different. George gradually realizes, this is not the kind of person I want to become. That is important character development. Thornhill's love of flattery. Goldsmith gives us a very revealing detail about Thornhill. He loves people who flatter him. He enjoys hearing that he is handsome, powerful, clever, generous, and desirable. George does not flatter him constantly. Therefore, Thornhill gradually prefers other companions who tell him what he wants to hear. This gives us another important theme: flattery versus truth. A person who constantly hears praise may eventually become unable to tolerate honest criticism. George is asked to fight a duel. Then comes a very important event. Thornhill becomes involved in a dispute concerning a woman's honor. He asks George to fight a duel on his behalf. This is a dangerous request. George does not know all the facts. He is not even completely certain that Thornhill is morally right. But George accepts the challenge. Why? Because he feels loyalty toward Thornhill. He is also influenced by the expectations of honor among gentlemen. This shows the dangerous social code of the period. A man could be expected to defend another person's honor through violence. What does George's duel show? The duel shows us both George's courage and his weakness. His courage: he is willing to face danger. His weakness: he allows another man's questionable behavior to place him in danger. So courage without judgment can become dangerous. George is brave, but he is still inexperienced. George's reputation suffers. The duel damages George's reputation. He becomes associated with a scandalous situation. Instead of being recognized simply as an educated young man, he becomes connected with Thornhill's questionable world. This is another example of how association with the wrong person can damage one's reputation. Think of a modern example. A good student becomes close friends with someone who is constantly involved in trouble. Even if the good student is innocent, other people may begin asking, "Why are you always with that person?" George experiences something similar: the exile. Now look at the third box. It says, the exile. George has to leave. But notice something important. Thornhill appears to help him. He obtains and offers his commission for George in a regiment going to the West Indies. At first, this looks like extraordinary generosity. George thinks, Thornhill is helping me build a future. Dr. Primrose also feels grateful. He even accepts the money as a debt. But we should look more carefully. Why does Thornhill want George to leave? Because George has become a potential obstacle. Thornhill and Arabella. Remember, Arabella Wilmot loves George. And Thornhill is trying to marry Arabella. Therefore, George is a rival. If George remains nearby, Thornhill's plans may fail. So sending George away to the West Indies conveniently removes him from the situation. This is a brilliant example of false generosity. Thornhill appears to help George. But his action also benefits himself. He gets George out of the way. So once again, appearance, generosity, reality, self-interest. This is one of the most important patterns in the novel. The West Indies Commission. The commission costs money. Thornhill says he will advance the money if the Primrose family cannot pay immediately. Dr. Primrose gives a bond promising repayment. This creates another financial connection between the Primrose family and Thornhill. Students, remember this carefully. Thornhill is not simply emotionally connected to the family. He is also becoming their creditor. This will become extremely important later. Because when the Primroses cannot repay him, Thornhill will use the debt against them. So what appears to be kindness eventually becomes a weapon. George leaves. George prepares to leave. This is an emotional moment. He leaves behind his father, Arabella, and the possibility of a happy family life. Dr. Primrose gives him his blessing. This is a beautiful father-son moment. Dr. Primrose encourages George to remember his family and his duty. George leaves with hope, but the reader knows that the family's situation is far from secure. Now the story changes direction. At this point, Dr. Primrose begins traveling home. He believes he has failed to find Olivia. He is tired. He is weak. He is emotionally exhausted. But something extraordinary is about to happen. He stops at an inn. And there, completely unexpectedly, he discovers Olivia. Dr. Primrose finds Olivia. Look at the lower left box. It says, Dr. Primrose finds Olivia. This is one of the most emotional moments in the novel. Imagine Dr. Primrose. He has spent days searching for his daughter. He believes she may be lost forever. Then suddenly he hears a woman's voice. He discovers that a poor and distressed young woman is staying at the inn. He realizes it is Olivia, his daughter. Olivia's condition. Olivia is no longer the confident young woman we saw earlier. She is physically and emotionally broken. She has experienced humiliation. She has been deceived. She is ashamed. She believes that she has destroyed her family's honor. She expects her father to hate her. But Dr. Primrose does something extremely important. He forgives her. The father's forgiveness. This is one of the strongest moments in the novel. Dr. Primrose could have said, "You brought this disgrace upon yourself." He could have rejected her. Instead, he says, in effect, "You are still my daughter." This is the moral power of parental love. The family has already suffered enough. Dr. Primrose understands that punishment will not repair the situation. Compassion is more important. The terrible reveal. Now we reach the final and most important box on the slide. It says, the terrible reveal. Olivia finally tells her father what really happened. And everything the family previously believed begins to change. Remember, earlier, the family thought Birchall was responsible for their troubles. Now Olivia reveals the truth. The real villain is Squire Thornhill. Thornhill's deception. Olivia explains that Thornhill deliberately manipulated her. He had used apparently respectable fashionable women as part of his plan. These women were not the respectable ladies the Primroses believed them to be. They were used as decoys. Their purpose was to encourage Olivia and Sophia to enter fashionable society and travel to London. But Birchall had warned them. This is extremely important. Suddenly the family understands. Birchall was never their enemy. He was trying to protect them. The letter is finally understood. Do you remember Birchall's mysterious letter? Earlier, the family thought, Birchall is insulting us. Now they discover the truth. Birchall's warnings were directed at the women who were trying to deceive the family. The Primroses had misunderstood his intentions. This is a powerful example of dramatic irony. The audience eventually understands the truth. The characters understand it only later. The great reversal. Think about the reversal. Earlier, Birchall equals suspected villain. Now, Birchall equals true friend. Earlier, Thornhill equals charming benefactor. Now, Thornhill equals real villain. This is one of the most important reversals in the entire novel. Goldsmith has deliberately trained us to question appearances. The secret marriage. Olivia then reveals something even more shocking. She says that Thornhill secretly arranged a marriage ceremony between them. The ceremony was performed by a Catholic priest. At first, Dr. Primrose is relieved. Why? Because he thinks, if Olivia is actually married to Thornhill, then at least she has the status of a wife. But Olivia explains that the situation is much worse. She had been led to believe that Thornhill's intention was marriage. But he had already behaved dishonorably toward other women. The ceremony was not the secure, respectable marriage Olivia imagined. Why does Dr. Primrose still accept Olivia? This is a very important moral moment. Olivia has been deceived. She made a serious mistake. But she did not deliberately choose evil. She was manipulated by someone who abused his social power. Therefore, Dr. Primrose does not simply condemn her. He sees the difference between sinful intention and a mistake made through deception. That is an important lesson in moral judgment.